Have you ever once known something without knowing how you knew it, only that suddenly you did? This is kinda like that. One day, I was a normal, average Joe. The next, well, I suddenly knew I could do it. What is IT? Maybe the best way to explain it is back at the beginning. I had just gotten home from work, a nice hot day where you go inside, sit in air conditioning and relax, except I didn't have air conditioning. In fact, I lived on the top floor of a 3-story apartment building and my place absorbed the heat from the apartments below me. A couple of fans placed strategically did the trick. One sucked in cooler air from outside, one recirculated the air in the apartment, and one blew the hotter indoor air out another window. Only thing is, when I got home, it was still an oven until I turned everything on, and it still took a little bit to cool down then. Normally, I'd grab my laptop, lay on my couch naked, and watch some porn or read some FM stories. After reading for a bit, and here's where it happened, I had a feeling. Maybe I was being hopeful, or I was inspired, or something, but I had a feeling. Something deep inside me told me that I could do what I read in the story, and so I decided to try. My hand was already playing with my balls, and I had already tried pushing my balls into the cavity and tucking years ago when I dated a girl who loved to go to midnight showings of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, so I was familiar with the motion, but this time was different. I pushed my left testicle into the cavity, and somehow knew that I could push it further. And I did. And I felt it pop into me and then could feel the empty cavity. I freaked out. I was now a one-nut wonder. I tried to pull it back, but there was nothing to pull on. The skin over that nut was already tightened and it looked like I naturally only had one testicle with a sack that was half the width it normally was. The only thing I could think of was the hose on my vacuum. Once again, I don't know how or why I thought it would work, but I somehow knew, and I put it over where I pushed left in, turned on and felt a pop. Shutting the vacuum off and removing the hose showed my natural nut sack, looking like it did 10 minutes prior. At this point, I figured whatever I did was undoable, but still wanted to take it slow just in case I was wrong. I had a gift and I fully intended to take advantage of it. It was the last workday before a 4-day weekend, and the timing couldn't have been better. I didn't want to test out anything else involving my penis, and so if one part could be shaped, why not all of me? I decided to see if I could play with my chest and what changes I could do. I took my fingertips and put them all together over my nipples and spread them apart. My nipples widened, as did my areolas, as much as I spread my fingers. I moved my fingers back together and everything was back to normal. I tried pulling on my nipples to see them elongate and my chest to cone out. When I released them, they bounced back and looked like a small pane of breasts, albeit a bit hairy. Pressing them in made them disappear. I had a good idea as to what I was playing with. Through experimenting over the next couple of months, I figured out all that I could do. It was a combination of imagining the change with physically pushing or pulling. The only thing I couldn't undo was when I stretched the hair out of the top of my head. Had to get a haircut for that one, although I could change the color by thinking about it as I was pulling. I also had to shave body hair, or use Veet like I did after the first time, and it had to grow back naturally. I could change my voice, even my teeth, but never tried with my eyes. My vision was already perfect and I didn't care that no matter what, I had brown eyes. So I had this wonderful gift. It was great, amazing, and yet I lost it. I was foolish and made a bad choice. That's the real story here. I made a habit of going to clubs as a party girl of Friday nights, each time getting a little more daring, a little more drunk. I also would make myself a little hotter, a little more irresistible each weekend. I developed a routine, which was, unfortunately, ignored just once, and here I am now. I got off work, and as soon as I got home, I jumped in the shower and used the Veet to get rid of all my body hair. Afterwards, I grew my hair out and was thinking of this wonderful red color that is now natural to me. I grew it out until it was a bit longer than I wanted, and then cut the brown off. Somehow it was styled while I stretched it. Not sure how that worked, or how it always came out great, but I wasn't questioning it. Next, as I always worked from the top down, I started to reshape my head. Some pushing here, pulling there, and I had a new nose, my eyes seemed bigger, my cheekbones were more pronounced, my lips bigger, jaw smoother, my whole head was a tiny bit smaller, and I even changed my teeth. There's something about a slight bucktooth on women that I always loved, and I would become what I loved each week, trying a new look. Once my head was completed, I gave a slight squeeze to my neck while pulling my head up slightly, making my neck a little longer and more slender. I took my thumb and slightly pressed while moving back and forth slightly while talking to myself until I had this voice I have now. Next, for my shoulders and chest, I hugged myself, pressing in on my shoulders and then my ribcage, compressing it all to a more feminine size. I then rubbed my arms up and down with pushing towards my shoulders to make them a bit smaller and less toned. My hands were next by almost shaking hands with myself and then sucking on each finger. As each one left my mouth, they were longer, more slender, and had a nice half-inch nail that was beautifully maintained. I skipped the breasts until last, and pressed in on my sides to bring my stomach in for my wonderful hourglass shape and pressed on my lower back while stretching to pop my pelvis's alignment. The hips were always tricky, and having my penis in the way made it harder, and while I was afraid to give myself a vagina as I didn't think I would get my penis back, I simply squeezed it until it was minuscule. Nothing to make a dent in my panties, but enough to stretch back to its normal size. I then pulled on but to give myself some padding, and then stretched my hips slightly by pulling on the sides. I had found that my hips and thighs looked better if I pushed from between my legs, and so I put both hands on the inside of my thighs and pushed them apart. I enjoyed having the gap, as I always thought it looked hot as all hell. My legs followed, with some kneading here and there to make them less muscular and more feminine. The feet were tricky, as the shoes either fit or didn't, so I had grabbed the pair I would wear that night, and shoved my feet into them. The squeezing lasted only a second before they were perfectly sized for them. I took them off and then put on my dress for the night. It wasn't anything fancy, but I did need to adjust my body a bit to fit it better. I wanted it to look tight, so I made my butt bigger, my hips a little bigger, and pulled on my chest to give myself amazing cleavage with my breasts just slightly overfilling the built-in bra. I sat down at a mirror and proceeded to put on my makeup that I had learned to do over the past couple of months until I was satisfied. I grabbed a small bag that would match my shoes, threw in my keys, a credit card, my phone, and some cash, put my shoes on, and headed out the door. Being as I was on the 3rd floor, in a cheap apartment building, there was no elevator, and I had to take the stairs. I was used to walking in heels by this time, yet the pair I had picked were a little taller than I was used to, and I decided after the first flight of stairs to give myself some help. I pinched my Achilles tendon and pulled it towards the back of my knee slightly. I then had no problems with the heels on the rest of the stairs. I then headed to the bus stop on my corner and took it downtown to go club hopping. Normally, I would have a few drinks, try to not get too drunk, and be a tease to all. This was where I made my mistake. I had a bit too much to drink, got a bit too friendly, grinded a bit too much, until one guy stuck his leg between mine and I ground myself on his leg hoping that he didn't feel anything wrong. He fortunately didn't, but it still made me hot. After a bit, he asked me if I wanted to leave, and I always drew the line here, except this time I drank too much, and drunk, horny me made a bad decision. I said sure, but that I wanted to use the little girl's room before we left. He said he'd meet me outside while I took care of business. I went into the women's room and went into a stall and tried to talk myself out of what I was about to do. I had figured that I was going to do it eventually, and that I might as well try it now. Drunk me is an idiot. I then proceeded to take my tiny penis and pushed it into me. I pushed it flat, and then took my index and middle fingers and pushed as deep into me as I could go. It felt amazing, and at the time, made me think I was making the right decision. As I pulled my fingers out, I decided that I needed some defined labia and used my thumbs to pinch the skin surrounding my new vagina to make it look more inviting. I then pulled my panties up, left the stall, and went outside to meet the man I was now ready for. I'm not going to go into any real details here, but it was the most amazing night of sex I ever had up until that point. I came multiple times and at one point passed out from a pleasure overload. The next morning, when I came to, I was surprised to find myself in an apartment that wasn't mine. The guy was still sleeping in bed with me when I snuck out and found the bathroom. I reached to enlarge my penis for my normal morning pee, only to find a wet hole that had crusted gunk all over the outside. I sat and figured I'd figure it out later, did my business, and then went to find my clothes and go home. When I got home, the first order of business was to get my penis back. I tried reaching into my vagina with no luck. I tried squeezing it shut. I even tried using the vacuum again. Nothing I tried worked. I gave up on it and started on turning the rest of me back to my normal self, but found that I couldn't do that either. Something was wrong, and when I felt sick a couple weeks later, I knew what happened. Turns out that I had gotten pregnant, and that took away this gift. It was a struggle to adjust to this new life, but when I showed back up at that guy's place to tell him that he was going to be a father, it made life a lot easier.